What's up everyone, Criddle here, and I want to go over Nick's stream from Friday. I know it's been a couple of days. I was kind of busy. Hopefully we'll be able to get these out a little bit sooner after the streams. I'm going to try to do more of these. So the stream was about 7.5 hours long, and this is going to be a meeting minute style video going over things that happened throughout the video of major importance. Things that I do recommend though is if you are interested in Nick's process, go and watch his stream, and you can actually get involved during his stream. It says he was taking information and asking the chat for a lot of different things, like even naming some of the abilities. They were kind of bouncing those ideas off, and even some numbers that they were putting into the abilities, like the duration of the mez and cooldowns and things of that nature. So really cool to be part of that. And then also I do want to mention that all of these numbers, everything you see during his stream is subject to change, as Nick does things off of feel, how he thinks the game should be, but then Runoff and their balance team will go in and adjust things later on. So don't expect these to come to the game that we play. They may or may not be the way that Nick puts them in, depending on how they are balanced. In addition to that, Nick does do giveaways for the alpha server during his stream. I believe he gave away 3 or 4 during this entire stream. So if you want to have a chance at getting those, definitely be checking out Nick's stream. In addition to those, if you go to any of the other developer streams, they may or may not do giveaways. Nick did mention that. And sometimes Nick will go in and do giveaways during their stream. I know I have seen him do that for Sean's stream. But other developers, if they want to do that, they will reach out to Nick and say, hey, Nick, we would like to do giveaways on my stream, whatever, and they will set that up. So don't go and bug all of the other developers. Some of them don't mind the giveaways and some of them don't want them. So Nick did mention that during this. So anyway, let's get into it. So after introductions, first couple of minutes of the stream, Nick was just saying hello and all that kind of stuff. On around the 7-minute mark, he actually talked about what his plan was for the stream, and that was to add in haste for bards. So bards currently have a haste song, but Nick did mention that that is a secondary haste song, meaning that it does stack with all primary haste, something that I was actually unaware of. So this is a really cool stream for me because I really enjoyed watching him make these different haste abilities. So he was going to be making a primary haste ability for the Bard, which then came into the discussion of, well, what about Beastmasters and Inquisitors and even the Monk haste? All of that stuff was being talked about here in the first few minutes. So Enchanters and Shaman currently have a primary haste that will stack with the Bard secondary haste that is already in the game. The Bard primary haste that we're going to be adding in during this stream will also stack with the Bard secondary haste if you want to weave those in. And you can or can't do that depending on what other classes you have in the party. So I thought that was really cool. He did then talk about the Beastmaster haste. So Beastmasters will be getting haste. And then Monk's haste stacks with all other haste. And that also includes the Archer haste, which he mentioned way further down later on in the stream. And I believe that also means that the Fighter haste from Frenzy also stacks, since those are all kind of the same line. So he's basically saying that all of those different haste stack. At the 16-minute mark, he talked about Beastmaster taming is currently being worked on. Didn't go into a lot of detail there, but it is currently being worked on. At 17 minutes, he goes over why having the charge, the grip, and the shadow step ability are in the game. And he mostly says those are just fun engagement tools for tanks, as it was something that was missing from EverQuest 1. So it's not supposed to be super overpowered or anything like that. It's just going to be a way for tanks to start a fight. 21-minute mark, he actually started looking at the different abilities and getting a feel for where the haste is currently at. And then he mentioned the Inquisitors getting haste and rapidity, and then also talked about Beastmasters also getting haste and rapidity at slightly later levels than the Inquisitor to keep in line with the Enchanter Shaman. So the idea here is the Enchanters get haste spells, I believe 4 levels before Shaman, and they end up getting the fastest haste in the game, and Shaman don't end up getting that fastest haste. Instead, they get the fastest slow. Or so the slowest slow spell, I guess. So the Beastmaster and Inquisitor will kind of be similar to that. So both of them are going to be getting their haste spells several levels later, anywhere from like 12 to 16 levels later, something along those lines. And then they're going to keep in line with how the Enchanter and Beast and Shaman are getting it, since the Inquisitor is kind of a hybrid Enchanter and the Beastmaster is kind of a hybrid Shaman. So that's basically how that is going to work. At 25-minute mark, he talked about the Beastmaster taming swarm pet idea is being worked on in addition to the main pet. So in the future, Beastmasters are going to tame their pets, and then they're going to be able to summon those. It's not going to be the same thing as the summon spells that they currently have. They're actually going to tame their pets and I believe level them up. He didn't go into a lot of detail on how that would work, but he did say he would like to have a swarm style pet. These are going to be temporary pets that just happen to appear, do something, and then maybe leave. We'll talk, actually he talked about that very quickly down at the 44-minute mark, so we're almost going to be there. Around the 30-minute mark, he talked about research discussion. So starting off with buying your core spells, you're just going to be able to buy core spells. That's not going to be an issue where you're going to have to go out and find specific spells to really define your character or your class. You will be able to buy those spells. The research may be used for things like variant group buffs. So you might have Spirit of the Wolf or Speed of the Wild. That might be a spell that you get on your Druid, for example, but then Pack Speed may be one of those research spells in the future. He didn't say that specifically. That's just an example that I want to give. So look for that. We might be getting group versions of single target spells in the future just to kind of make quality of life a little bit easier and give you something to go after, but not necessarily completely break it where, oh my goodness, you're the only person on the server that has this particular spell. He did also talk about hybrids during the research. Hybrids are going to be included in the research, but they're going to have to get that from their parent class. He didn't go into a lot of detail here, but it sounded like you're going to have to find somebody of your parent class. So if you're a Beastmaster, you're going to need to find a Shaman. If you're an Inquisitor, you're going to need to find an Enchanter to be able to research those spells for you. That's kind of what it sounded like to me. So jumping back to that 44-minute mark that I was talking about just a minute ago, is they're trying to design out the Beastmaster swarm ability. And one idea that Nick has is maybe a proc. So while a Beastmaster is fighting, he may proc an ability that then adds in a swarm of rats, for example. So something along those lines could be really cool. Let's see, during this, he also talked about the haste spells, and we're looking at getting the Beastmaster pet haste spell. So they're going to get an additional haste spell, primary haste of the Shaman class, and then also a pet haste exclusive spell. And that's going to be at level 36, and then another one at 52 that is going to be exclusive to their pets. At the 56-minute mark, the main pet you tame with procs, he kind of talks about that a little bit more. Kind of going over, you're going to have a main pet, and then you're also going to have additional potentially procking pets that appear and then go away. At the 1 hour mark, we've got a stats discussion from the last open test. So he kind of talked about that, went into a little bit of detail and showed some stats because we haven't had a video at the point of this particular stream. I believe there is now a video on YouTube going over the stats of that. So if you're interested in that, you can go check that video out on the Monsters and Memories YouTube. At the 1 hour, 10-minute mark, he was naming the Bard spells. This is what I was talking about earlier, where he got a lot of input from chat, and they went on for several minutes, many times throughout, trying to name different spells. This was probably the majority of his stream if you were to pick out one thing that took the most time, and it was literally coming up with names for the different abilities. But it was really fun to see people come up with different names and what they would like them to be, and then Nick kind of say, hey, I like this, I don't like that, you know, kind of, it was an interesting conversation. At the hour 17-minute mark, there was a melody discussion. If you don't know what melodies are, this is something that they pulled in from EverQuest 1, where you could weave multiple songs together and play one song rather than have to constantly be hitting a bunch of different songs. Nick said that they might do that in the future. There is no plan for it right now, but if they do, it will be a limited number of abilities. So right now you can weave 4, maybe 5 different abilities together if you're really good. If they do a melody kind of thing, it'll be like 2, 3 tops. So you will not be getting as much potential, but it will make the gameplay a lot easier. Bards right now are a very high APM class or actions per minute. So if you don't want to play a high APM class, I do not recommend playing Bard. And in the future, they may change that, but it will definitely make the Bard less powerful because you're only going to be getting a couple of the abilities through a melody. At the 1 hour, 29 minute mark, Nick was a little bit shocked by the amount of haste that enchanters can give, seeing that they can give 75% haste at their highest level. And he said he may want to get that nerfed. It may be a little bit too much. So he's going to be sending that over to Runoff and possibly making sure they look at that to see if that's something that they need to tweak, down a little bit, because it may be a little bit too fast. At the 1 hour, 39 minute mark, we're finally adding in the haste spells for bards that we started with at the 7-minute mark. That's where that starts. At 141, actual values are being entered for the haste. So if you want to see that kind of stuff. 2 hour mark, a sneak peek of racial stats with slight changes based on class. So I'll go quickly over this. I'm probably going to show some images of this, but basically he's showing that in the future, races are going to have different stats, and they have a variety of different stats. All of this is subject to change, so don't take what you're seeing, hopefully here on the screen, as guaranteed this is what these numbers are going to be. I know there's already been some discussion on Discord about this. These are all just right now preliminary numbers and may change in the future. To get these stat changes, Nick did say that we might have to remake characters. So that's another thing that he did want to mention. He's not sure if they will be retroactive changes or if you're going to have to make an all new character to get these new changes for those stat caps. At the 2 hour, 8 minute mark, the stat cap discussion kind of started, and Nick said he was unsure, but he was thinking that there was no stat cap whatsoever. But then somebody else in chat said it was 255. I personally do not know if there is a stat cap, so that is kind of still up for debate. However, the resist cap question came up. Is a resist cap of 100? Nick said he does not know, but I can say that in my personal testing, I was not able to get over 100 on a single resist. I tested this with fire resist specifically on a high level character, and I had like 90 or 95 resist, and then I had a spell cast on me that was supposed to add 15 or whatever it was and push me over 100, and I capped out at 100. So currently, resist cap is 100. Stat cap, I'm not 100% sure, and Nick was not 100% sure either on that. At 2 hour, 17 minute mark, I say finally making the Bard. I guess he actually started doing some more Bard stuff. And he was going to be working on Bard Shouts, which we started at the 2 hour, 21 minute mark. So Bard Shout discussion, Fear Shout, and Mez Shout were being discussed. And eventually, I believe both of those were made during the stream. So I will talk about that whenever that happens. 2 hour, 31 minute mark, we started talking about the D1 expansion. So module 1 is going to come out. So basically we're going to get early access first quarter, hopefully, if everything works out. And then module 1 and D1, which are kind of the same thing, but kind of different. So D1 means deep zones and deep races. It's the deep, basically, DLC that they're going to be adding in. It's going to be free once they do add that in. But that's basically what he was talking about there. And it's going to be additional zones and additional races that you'll be able to play. 2 hour and 55 minute mark, more stat discussion changes. 3 hour, 4 minute mark shows off Enchant Ally for the Enchanter and how that works. This is interesting for those that don't understand how the Enchant Ally works. And he kind of talks about this because people are saying how powerful Charm is, and basically that if you play an enchanter in a group, you have to use Charm. And he says, well, the idea is if you don't want to use Charm and you want to just be a mezzer, you could use the Enchant Ally to still be beneficial in combat. You could put Enchant Ally on a monk while they're pulling, so you can see through their eyes and hopefully help them pull or give them a rune so that they don't die when they're trying to pull, things of that nature. So he kind of showed off a little bit of how the Enchant Ally is meant to work. And hopefully that is how it will work in the future. At the 3 hour, 9 minute mark, he talks about the giant green castle out in the distance. I'm sure that all of you have seen at this point. That is called Fallen Watch, and it should be a zone in the game by early access, if not before. So we might be seeing that before early access. And he did talk about possibly having another open alpha test / beta test, depending on where they're at that time, before early access hits, but they don't have any dates right now. I may talk about that again here in the future. 3 hour, 24 minute mark, he talks about the GM application. A lot of people are interested in becoming a GM for Monsters and Memories. They do have a few applicants from the previous application process, but there is an application that you can fill out. I will put the link down in the description below, so definitely check that out if you're interested in it. But they do have a few people that they still liked from the previous application, so get your application in if you want to do that, is the short version of that. 3 hour, 26 minute mark, play test before end of year. Quote, I think so. That is all that Nick said about that. He did not have any dates or anything like that, but hopefully we will see one. 3 hour, 28 minutes. If they go to Steam, will they go to Steam? I believe was the question in chat. And he said, if they go to Steam, it will be at 1.0 or later, but that is not something that they are currently looking at or talking about or anything like that. So Steam access is still up in the air. Nobody knows. And that will not be a thing until most likely 1.0 or later, if ever, is the best way that I can explain that. 3 hour, 30 minute mark. Spellblade will probably get more stuff, is basically all they talked about. And the things that he said are things like shielding, infusion, and more martial abilities, but none of that is currently planned. That is just things off the top of Nick's head, where he just said that that's what he would like to see out of the class. 3 hour, 32 minute mark. More Inquisitor sneak peeks. So people wanted to know, hey, you're changing the Inquisitor. I know that's been a big topic lately. So Inquisitor sneak peeks. Hopefully I'll put up some more pictures and stuff here so you can see what these things are. But they're going to be adding something called Focus Concentration to the Inquisitor, Shadow Knight, and Paladin. And this is going to be a level 7 ability that is going to give those classes 1,000 concentration skill. So normally, if you are trying to get concentration and you're level 60, 300 would be your max. This is going to give you 1,000 to that skill, starting as low as level 7, meaning that you are going to be able to take hits and be able to cast spells. This will be huge for classes like the Paladin, who right now there is no really good AoE tank class, but if the Paladin is able to get off heals while they are tanking, that is going to be a lot of AoE threat, which is going to be fantastic for AoE tanking. This is not something that Nick said. It's just something that I am saying. It will be absolutely amazing. In addition to that, people have complained about being able to get spells off with the Inquisitor or the Shadow Knight or the Paladin while tanking, and this is going to help alleviate some of that. So that's basically what's going on there. 4 hours, 9 minute mark, created a character and played around for a bit. I might do some gameplay footage of that. Nick created a rogue, killed a few mobs, and then worked on the starter quest with some light commentary. Nothing major happened during this, but it's just kind of Nick goofing off and playing around in the game. 4 hour, 34 minute mark during this little play time, he talked about the safe fall skill being looked at being added into the next patch. It will be a skill, not an ability. He did not go into any further detail on what classes will be getting that, but they are looking at adding safe fall. 4 hours, 55 minutes, spent a good 5 to 10 minutes discussing with chat about naming the shout mez for bards. Again, another good portion of the stream where he's just trying to figure out, what do I name these abilities? And they ended up coming up with a whisper line at the end of the whole thing. I'm not going to go over, I don't remember what each individual name was, but it was 4 different spells or abilities, and they are going to have whisper at the end of it. I don't think that anybody realized that there's a druid line that has whisper in it already, so I don't know if that'll end up changing in the future. But currently it is called Whisper, and it's a Bard AoE Mez ability. And it's on a 90-second recast, and the Mez duration ranges from either 2 to 3 seconds up to like 6 seconds at the higher level. and that's what it's going to be. It's going to be an instant cast, I believe, off global cooldown, kind of a, oh, junk, we pulled too many mobs, mez everything for a few seconds while we figure out what we need to do. 5 hour, 20-minute mark. Nick thanks everyone for the support and talks a bit about how this is his dream coming. So if you want to know all about, Nick's thoughts on how much this means to him, that's around the 5 hour, 20-minute mark. And he also talks about his birthday, which is coming up on November 27th. So you can all send him happy birthday wishes if you want to do that. 5 hour, 49-minute mark. Talked a bit more about D1 plans. And those are going to be 4 to 5 months after early access starts. Anywhere from 5 to 6 new zones, including a couple of dungeons. And these are all going to be varying level ranges. He said they're going to start from probably mid-range levels. So I'm thinking around level 20 to 30, all the way up to level 60 with some potential in-game content in there. So like maybe bigger raid bosses or just level 60 hard single group things. And then he also talked about 3 major cities. Somebody in chat asked about this. Night Harbor being one of those 3 major cities, but they're planning on having 2 other ones. So Terralon is going to be a traditional fantasy city, and then East Him is another city, and they're going to be the 3 main hubs of the game. So this does not include things like the Elven city that is currently in the game, and then there's going to be a Deep Elf city also added for D1, and does not include that. So there's going to be many different cities throughout the game, hopefully at the start of or maybe a little bit into early access. And then basically nothing else happened really through the rest of the stream. At the end of the stream, around 7 hours, 13-minute mark, Nick starts messing around with Summon Firewood for Rangers, which is a campfire ability that's not in the game, but it's just something that he was just like, yeah, let's add this in. And then they added it in and then never really used it. And then he kind of did like this big mass pull that he did. Maybe I'll show that here on the screen for the end. Anyway, that is a summary of Nick's stream from Friday. Hopefully this information is good for you all. If it is, please like, subscribe, follow, all that kind of stuff. Be sure to come over to the Twitch stream and chat with me, where I love chatting about Monsters and Memories and many other games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.